What does it mean when people talk about slow living? What is so simple about simple living? And what exactly is ancestral homekeeping? Perhaps it is easier to start by telling you what these things aren't. People have a lot of misconceptions about slow, simple living. Many are under the impression that we live lives similar to the Amish, eschewing technology and never visiting the grocery store. Others think we are more akin to minimalists, discarding all of our possessions in favor of a more stoic and monochromatic existence. Still others believe that slow living means embracing a life on the homestead, complete with livestock, a pantry full of canning jars, and a dozen small children running around. None of these things are required for living a slower and simpler life. Being connected to our ancestors does not mean pretending to live in the 1800s. Of course, we might draw inspiration from an older way of doing things. We might enjoy canning and baking and owning fewer possessions, gardening, reading books, and keeping backyard chickens. But these things do not define slow and simple living. Growing and keeping a home in ancestral alignment does not rely on anything you might perceive from the outside at first. It is all about the motivations within. So, what is it? A slow, simple lifestyle is one that carefully prioritizes mindfulness and presence in daily life. A lifestyle that turns away from modern society's insistence on productivity, multitasking, and dozens of weekly activities outside the home. It favors connection with community and the earth over being busy in order to constantly consume. The stereotypes I mentioned earlier are rooted in some basic philosophies we slow-living folks seem to share. We tend to value quality over quantity, preferring to spend more money on a single well-made garment that will last decades, over half a dozen from the latest season at our local big box store. We also usually prioritize fixing or mending things that are broken, instead of discarding them and buying new again. Most of us prefer to cook whole foods from scratch when we can, instead of basing our diets on food that has been heavily processed. We generally enjoy what's come to be known as granny hobbies, things like gardening and knitting, bread baking and crocheting. These types of activities can really only be done slowly, and you don't need a ton of fancy and expensive materials to do them. The point is, a slow or simple lifestyle is one that is not filled with rushing about in a house bursting with unnecessary possessions. Our goal in life is not to work 1,000,000 hours a week so that we can make so much money that we have tons of cars and boats and houses and closets full of designer goods. For most of us, our goals are humble. We'd like to be surrounded by friends and family. We'd like to enjoy nature, the feeling of sunshine on our faces and moss under our feet. We show our care and affection by cooking nourishing foods for our loved ones and staying present with them when they need us. So what about this other term, ancestral homekeeping? Okay, confession time. I made it up. I dislike the term homemaking because I feel that on social media it has begun to only represent that small-minded, stereotypical type of person that you might have been thinking of when you heard the term slow and simple living. I wanted a term that was more inclusive, so people of all faiths and bodies and colors and identities could feel seen and encouraged by this work we do in our home life. So I call it homekeeping. It evokes not just making something once and being done with it, but the practice of holding on to something by actively maintaining and managing it. It's something everyone can practice. You can practice this if you work outside the home, or are unemployed, or are a full-time caregiver. It's less about pretty dresses and sourdough, though as I've said, those certainly can be a part of it, and more about what kind of atmosphere we want to foster in our sacred space. Because the home is a sacred space. It is where we should be able to feel truly free, to love and be loved, and live imperfectly. It is where we dream and pray and meditate, where we feel safe enough to allow our minds to connect with the beyond. We all have ancestors and ancestral legacies. By connecting to them, to their practices and wisdom, we can better contextualize the work we do in this life. We can apply their guidance to a world that they would not recognize, but that they would work to make safe and beautiful. By examining the ancient principles that guided our ancestors and blending them in with mindfulness practices and modern understandings of emotional health, social justice, we can create homes that are vibrant and nurturing. Our modern interpretations of slow and simple living stem directly from many ancestral practices from hundreds of cultures all over the world. Ancestral homekeeping reimagines the world to be something our ancestors dared not dream of. An inclusive, just, and welcoming world. A safe world where folks are kind and honest, and the food nourishes us, and we humble ourselves daily in our quests to become whole. The tide is shifting, and it begins at home. It begins here, with you.